Hey everyone, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at the digestive system today. This might bring you back to your magic school bus days because we are going to kind of follow the natural path that food might take. Let's pretend that we're getting in the school bus and we just got swallowed, which is how like 9 out of 10 of those cartoons started, if I'm remembering correctly. So anyway, of course, you enter the oral cavity, the mouth first. We have a few salivary glands here. I don't actually think they're on your notes on anponline.com for some reason, which means I won't quiz you on them, but just so you can see them, we have the parotid glands. And if you've ever ate something sour, I don't know actually exactly what triggers it, but you might actually feel a sharp pain in these glands, but those are the parotid. And then we have the submandibular underneath the mandible. Okay, from there you're going to go into the oropharynx, and then the laryngopharynx, and then the esophagus. So the esophagus has a few different regions. I didn't break it down on your notes, but you have the cervical part referring to the cervical spine or the neck. That's what cervical means. Then we have the thoracic part next to the thoracic spine. And then the abdominal part. You know what, we're going to have to remove the liver. Here we go. And then the abdominal part, which is very small because it runs into the, oh, you know what, they didn't label it. I do want you to know that right about, it's nice in lab because what we can do is feel the stomach. So this is one situation where I do kind of wish we were in lab, but right about here, you can feel the lower esophageal sphincter. So if you see something tagged like that, that would be the esophageal sphincter. I won't actually ask you about the different regions of the esophagus or the cardiac part of the stomach. So just to make it simple, if you see something right here, tagged, that's the lower esophageal sphincter. So it's a bit of smooth muscle there that's able to keep or limit regurgitation of stomach contents into the esophagus. Although it can happen. If you ever had heartburn, you know that it can still happen. So anyway, let's look at the stomach. This is a pretty large looking stomach. I mean, this doesn't seem like the typical size stomach that I'm used to seeing on the cadavers, but you never know. So anyway, this top part, which is oftentimes even a little bit more domed than this, but you can see that it has a domed appearance to it. That's the fundus of the stomach. Then we have the body of the stomach. And then down here, it starts to funnel out, and we call that the pyloric, or the pyloric region of the stomach. They call it the pyloric antrum of stomach, that's fine. And then, I don't know if they'll have it labeled, but right after that, we have our pyloric sphincter. And they just say pyloric canal, which again is correct, but there's a little band of smooth muscle here that we call the pyloric sphincter that can separate the stomach and the duodenum so that gastric motility can occur, that digestion can occur in the stomach before the stomach empties into the small intestine. Let me look at the notes real quick so I can go in the right order. Okay, yes, so next we're going into the small intestine. So we have the duodenum. Now you can just barely see it. It's only about 8 to 10 inches long anyway, but one of the things about the duodenum is that it's retroperitoneal. Now, I wonder if we can somehow add the peritoneum in here. What would they label that? I guess not, but I'll post an image in the module showing what the peritoneum is. It's just connective tissue. All of these structures are wrapped in connective tissue, but that connective tissue is anchored to the posterior aspect of the abdominal cavity, and it sort of creates a wall. And some structures are retroperitoneal, meaning they're behind this wall of connective tissue, and some are in front of it. There's just a few structures that are behind it, your kidneys, your duodenum, the pancreas is behind it. I won't ask you which structures are retroperitoneal on a quiz or anything like that. I just wanted to point out that the duodenum is retroperitoneal, so in a typical cadaver, you can't really see it. So this would all be covered here. And that's the case because of the greater omentum is here. But even if we were to lift the greater omentum up, which you can do because it kind of hangs down like an apron, you wouldn't be able to see it. So anyway, so here's the duodenum. It's the first 8 to 10 inches of the small intestine. It emerges, typically we can lift this transverse colon up a little bit and we see a portion of the small intestine almost appear like it's just coming out of the back of the abdominal cavity. Because again, this would all be covered in tissue. And so that when we see that re-emerge, that's when we start to call it the jejunum. So it's the duodenum when it's back here behind the peritoneum and just right after the pyloric sphincter, about 8 to 10 inches. And then we get to the jejunum, which is the first visible portion of the small intestine down here after the duodenum goes underneath the transverse colon. So to keep it simple, basically, if it's the top third, you can call that jejunum. And if it's anywhere in here-ish, you can call it the ileum. So the jejunum and the ileum. So those are the 3 parts of the small intestine. Duodenum. Don't worry about anterior, posterior. It's pretty self-explanatory, right? So the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So if I tag those on a quiz, I will do my best to tag it like, what is this? And you'll say ileum. What is this? Jejunum. I'll try to keep it simple. But remember, this would also be ileum, and this would also be ileum. There's kind of like this segmentation like that. Okay, J, I, jejunum, ileum. And then this is a duodenum up here. Okay, so then there's a valve, which they probably won't have labeled. No, but there's a junction here between the ileum and the cecum, which is the cecum's the first part of the large intestine or the colon, and it's not muscular like the sphincter, so you can't really feel it that well. But do know that there is a valve right here. It's on your notes. That's the ileocecal valve. So if you see a little line like that, and maybe on the quizzes I'll say like identify this valve or something, and you would know that's the ileocecal valve. Okay, so we've talked about the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine. Now we're entering the large intestine. And they break it into different portions. For me, basically, if you see a tag down here on this big pouch, this bulb, that's going to be the cecum. And then hanging off of the cecum, this is never what it looks like. This is kind of funny. It's usually a lot thinner, the appendix, but this is the vermiform appendix. Now, people have appendicitis, and this can be removed, and those people are generally fine. It does have a role, though. There's lymphoid tissue in there, and so, as bacteria and different things pass through this area, those pathogens are exposed to the lymphoid tissue, and your body can produce antibodies and things. So it's not entirely useless, but you can have it removed. And it's life-threatening if it bursts. So I wonder if any of you guys have had your appendix removed. I am very grateful that I still have mine. But anyway, some symptoms. Oh, you guys know that I like to write boards questions. So a boards question that I write is someone has lower right quadrant pain that worsens in terminal stance, when their legs back behind them. What would you do next to differentially diagnose the patient? And the issue is that there's a muscle right here that, if it's very tight or injured, is painful in terminal stance, but also you have the appendix right here. So a couple different correct answers would be you could apply some gentle pressure to this point right here. I forget what it's called, McBurney's point or something. Or you can check the patient's temperature. So checking the patient's temperature would rule out or rule in infection. So if the patient has a temperature and they have right lower quadrant pain, you'd want to get them checked out for appendicitis. Anyway, okay, sorry. So cecum, ascending colon is this area here, ascending colon, because it's ascending. The food, we'll call it food to be kind, the food is ascending at this point. So it's the ascending colon. This, I don't know if it's in your notes, but this is called the hepatic flexure. Let me see if it is. No. Okay, no worries. Because it's, by the liver, hepatic. And then over here, this is the splenic flexure because it's by the spleen. But I guess I didn't put those in your notes, so don't worry too much about that. Here we have the transverse colon because the food is moving in a transverse direction from right to left. And then we have the descending colon here. I don't want to overdo it. Let's see where they say it stops. Oh no, they take it all the way down to here. So descending colon because the food is descending. Then you have the sigmoid colon. The sigmoid colon kind of brings it posteriorly where it empties into the rectum. So that's large intestine. Here we go. Ascending, cecum, ascending, transverse, descending, sigmoid, rectum. What else is on your notes? Okay, Taenia coli. Forgot about Taenia coli, I should say. Let's see if they tagged it. They do. Oh, they even have different, very highly specific names for that. That's pretty cool. So, I just kind of want to go through these real quick. So they have the free Taenia. I've never seen it written that way. Free Taenia, ascending part. Then they have the omental Taenia. That makes sense because the greater omentum attaches there. Free Taenia descending. Okay, so I've always learned this as Taenia coli, which is how I wrote it in your notes. But if you want to use one of these words, that's fine, as long as it matches. It's correct. So you're probably better off just saying Taenia coli for all of it. This is, we have a few different things going on here. We have these pouches called hostra with rings around them, right? So these are rings here. And then we have the smooth muscle band called the Taenia coli. So imagine if this band were to constrict and then this longitudinal band of smooth muscle were to contract, that would pull the food, again being nice, that direction. So that's, oh, hold on one second, my daughter is trying to get my attention. Okay, I'm back. New episode of Peppa Pig has been played on YouTube, so we're good to go. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, okay, we're just talking about the different constrictions of these smooth muscle bands to move things along. So that's the Taenia, with what the Taenia coli does. Let's talk about some of the peritoneal structures. So we're not going to be able to see all of them because they don't have mesentery proper in here. They must have mesentery proper. They really don't. Okay, that's okay. But we'll talk about the ones we can see. So let me refresh this. So this structure here is called the greater omentum. Now, the reason it's called a greater omentum, because there is a lesser omentum as well, right there, is because it attaches to something I forgot to name, the greater curvature of the stomach. This is the lesser curvature. So you have the greater omentum and the lesser omentum. You'll also see this called the gastrocolic ligament and the gastrohepatic ligament. It's not really a ligament. I mean, the lesser more so, does hold things together. Less so for the greater omentum, but look at this structure. It's so interesting. It just covers the entire small and large intestine. And one of the things it will do is if there's an area that becomes inflamed or infected, it will encapsulate that area. You'll see it move and kind of surround that area. So it's an interesting structure. But anyway, lots of big blood supply. It's mostly fatty and connective tissue with arteries and veins inside of it. So that's the peritoneal structure because it's a part of what forms this connective tissue Um, hey, Harper. Okay, sorry about that, guys. We should be interruption free. My daughter's going to ballet class soon, so. Okay, so we just talked about the greater omentum. There's a few structures. We also talked about the lesser omentum. There's a few structures that are a part of the peritoneum that I can't really draw. They're connective tissue structures that anchor all of these intestines in place. So there's two different types. Similar composition, they're just named differently based on what they attach to. There's the mesentery proper, which is the connective tissue that shrink wraps and surrounds the small intestine and anchors it to the peritoneal wall. And there's no way for me to illustrate that, unfortunately. I don't know if that's some kind of upgrade or it's not part of connective tissue, so I'm not exactly sure how we could get that. I may try to find a photo and put it in the module. But okay, so that's mesentery proper. There's also mesenteries that attach the large intestine to the peritoneal wall. And each piece has each piece of colon, right? And it's named based on what it's attaching to. So this would be the ascending mesocolon, the transverse mesocolon, the descending mesocolon, the sigmoid mesocolon, and it's connective tissue that connects the colon to the peritoneum, which is the membrane that lines the abdominal cavity, but also surrounds all of the intestinal organs. So it's a little bit different than like pleura, where you have two separate membranes. One lines the cavity and one surrounds the lungs. It's a little different than that because it's one continuous membrane that both lines the cavity and covers the organ. So I'll see if I can find a picture and I'll put it in the module on anponline.com. It's not super important that you understand it conceptually. It's just on your notes, so I want to call it out. Then after that, I'll probably do a separate video for the splanchnic circulation. So let's go up your list a little bit. It looks like I skipped over the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, and we'll call out the spleen as well, even though it's not part of the digestive system. But here's your liver. It's a huge organ, obviously. It's highly variable. I've looked at a lot of MRIs where the liver looks very different than this. I've seen a lot of cadavers where the liver looks either very small or huge or misshapen, or there's a missing lobe, or one lobe is very small and the other lobe is very big. There's all sorts of variability, but generally speaking, it sort of looks like this. We have a right lobe and a left lobe, and in the middle here we have the falciform ligament. It's a pretty interesting ligament. It's fun to find in the cadaver. Anyway, what else about the liver? I think that's it. Let's talk about the gallbladder. So here's the gallbladder right here. Stores bile. And then right by the pancreas. So these are all digestive organs. You have pancreatic lipase, you have bilirubin being produced, and bile is made and stored in the gallbladder. And then there's a duct for this gallbladder to empty its contents into the duodenum, where fat is emulsified and nutrients are absorbed. But for lab, you just need to know the names of these organs, okay? So we have the pancreas in yellow here, kind of has like a funny appearance, almost looks like fat. And it's bigger than it appears here. The duodenum sort of wraps around it, so let's hide some stuff. Ooh, that's pretty cool. There you go. The pancreas is much bigger. It has a tail and a body and a head, but don't worry about that. We'll just, if you see this structure tagged here, that is your pancreas. And you guys know a lot about the pancreas. It produces insulin and glucagon in the islet of Langerhans cells. And here's the spleen. The tail of the pancreas sort of makes contact with the spleen. I have seen some weird spleens as well. I've seen tiny shriveled up ones. I've seen huge ones as well. So not technically a digestive organ, but there it is. Okay. I believe that's it. Just one quick story about the gallbladder. My mother-in-law was having a lot of pain in, I guess, vaguely like this area. A lot of pain. And so we went to the emergency room, and the triage nurse was kind of helping out, and she said, hey, I'm having a ton of pain, and my skin is itchy. But she didn't really say it like back to back like that. The nurse would have had to be really observant to pick up on it, because she was kind of mentioning like, man, my skin is so itchy, like to us, to my wife and I, in the room with the nurse. But the main symptom she was complaining with to the nurse was pain, abdominal pain. And so they told her she was probably just constipated, and they sent her home with laxatives. And I wish I had been, I don't know, paying more attention. I didn't have my like physiology cap on or my clinician cap on. I was basically just saying, hey, let's let the people working here handle this. You don't want to be like one of those people who comes in and thinks they know everything because they read it on WebMD or whatever. But what I should have said, I should have mentioned to the nurse, I should have said, hey, itchy skin, abdominal pain. Some of you guys may already be thinking you know what I'm going to say. That's indicative of a gallbladder issue, because the bile, the bilirubin, is in your blood, and you get something called pruritus, where your skin itches. It's kind of like jaundice. That like jaundice in babies, a milder form, and you just get itchy skin, and it's because something's wrong with the gallbladder. It's obstructed, and there's bile being produced and spilling into the blood. So anyway, that's what was happening to her, and it got really bad. She went back to the emergency room, and someone there was smart and did some more tests and determined that her gallbladder had to be removed. So she had an emergency gallbladder removal right there, within like 30 minutes of arriving at the hospital. So anyway, yeah, a lot of the cadavers will be missing a gallbladder. And oftentimes this whole area is stained green because the gallbladder ruptures. Anyway, okay, so that is the digestive system, my friends. So we went from the mouth, we went through the esophagus, the stomach, the 3 regions of the small intestine, the large intestine. We talked about the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder. And that is it. Thank you guys. I'll probably do another video for splanchnic circulation, which is the blood vessels that supply this area, and I'll post a photo of what the peritoneum looks like. Thanks, guys.